Lizabel, the fairy that fell asleep. Once upon a time, of course, there was a small fairy by the name of Lizabel. She lived in a forest with many fairy friends, and every day she would snooze under a beautiful white willow tree. One day, however, Lizabel went to sleep, and when she woke up, everyone was gone. Oh no, for Lizabel! She decided then that she would search for her friends and the fairy queen, and never stop till she had found them. So she walked along the river where her friends used to play, and there in the water she saw a beautiful blue crystal. Lizabel reached in and held it gently, remembering how the sky used to shine in her home, and she decided to carry it with her as she walked. It was many days, and she felt she would never find her friends, when she heard a small blue nightingale singing a beautiful song. So she followed its voice to a small house in the woods. Inside was a mom preparing supper for her family, and a fire burned brightly, and the children were chattering, and it was so happy and peaceful that it made her miss her fairy friends very much indeed. Later that night, she listened as the mom read fairy stories, and although their happiness made her miss her friends, it made her happy too, for she loved to hear stories of the fairy realm. She waited till the family were asleep, and then took a chair by the fire and began to read the stories again and again, glad that she had found a place to rest for a while. The following day, however, she started searching again, and her new friend, the blue nightingale, flew along beside her. He sang all the time. His heart was so full of joy, and she felt like her fairy friends were singing all around her. Soon they came to a clearing in the woods, and to her great sadness she saw a deer lying in the clearing. Very carefully she cleaned his wound, and that night, after giving him water, she lay down beside him, speaking kind words, and letting him know that he would be well soon. For many days she cared for the deer, and soon he was able to get up and walk with her, for he had decided he would join her on her travels. Lizabel spoke so lovingly of the fairy realm that he was sure he would be happy there. Lizabel and her friends travelled on together for many more days, and she realized that although she didn't have her fairy friends, she had new friends, and if she never did find the fairy realm, she could be happy. That night she lay down in the circle of her friends, and the animals of the forest gathered round. She fell asleep, quite happy, though she wasn't at home yet. When she woke, she was greeted by a smile like a ray of the sun, for who stood before her but the fairy queen in all her majesty? Lizabel instantly bowed to the queen, seeing all her old fairy friends gathered around her. "Oh, your majesty, I lost you. I thought I would never find you." The queen nodded, beaming at the young fairy. "Your journey was indeed hard, but you have found friends, have you not?" Lizabel nodded, and the fairy court showered her and her friends with flowers, welcoming them home and to the fairy realm. "They really are wonderful," said Lizabel. "Can they stay here with me?" "Of course," said her majesty, who was indeed a very fine queen, and so happy was Lizabel that her wings flapped and she flew around the fairy court. Later that evening, Lizabel sat beside the queen at a very fine feast, and she asked her what had happened. "Where did everyone go? I was so afraid that I would never find you." The queen nodded. "Do not worry, Lizabel, you belong here, but sometimes we send one of our kind to find lost friends, like the deer and the nightingale, for they belong here, and now you you have brought them home." "And what of the blue crystal?" "Ah," said the Queen, "that was my gift, so you would not forget us." "Never, your Majesty. I could never forget the fairy realm." And she smiled very much, for indeed she was happy to be home. The crystal was placed on a pillar at the centre of the fairy court, and it was held in high regard, for it was not just a reminder of Isabel's home, it also held the memory of her adventures, and the fairies loved to hear them. Over the following days, the friends settled into the fairy court, and it would be true to say that they lived happily ever after. And indeed, Isabel had very little reason to leave the fairy realm, but every now and again she would go to the cottage in the woods, listen to the family stories, and bring them home to the amusement of all the Queen's courtiers, for they loved to hear the stories of the fairy realms from the children's books. As for Isabel and her friends, well, as I said, they lived happily ever after. This is the Fanula Swan Children's Booth, and good night.